you've shifted your positions politically to try to be more appealing. For example, on immigration, you admit you flipped and got a little bit more hardline on that.
But having talked to border state governors, having talked to other people and seeing how screwed up immigration has become under this president, it was clear to me, talking to them, looking at this issue, traveling to the border, actually going there with the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, seeing the problems here. Yeah, from my standpoint going forward, we need to secure the border. We need to enforce the laws that we currently have through an effective E-Verify system.
The best plan, the most realistic plan, the grown-up plan, if you will.
You are listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. Scott Walker is getting, hammered by the Washington Post, MSNBC, and the Huffington Post, all media outlets essentially saying that his stance is stupid and just politically motivated, and that he doesn't really understand economics. If he takes this stance, which focuses on enforcement and establishing credibility on that, then he's just not seeing the bigger picture. So what's going on here? One of those who's been somewhat critical of Walker is Jennifer Rubin from the Washington Post, and we read Jennifer and read her stuff all the time, and some stuff we agree with, some stuff we don't, but, big deal. So what? We can have a conversation about it. And she joins us now. Jennifer, it's great to talk to you again. How are you?
Great to talk to you. Thanks for having me on. I always appreciate it.
Absolutely. So tell us what you said it's not clear whether he understands that immigration is one way to boost economic growth. We have the temptation in the GOP primary to play to the loudest voices and the staunchest segment of the party, even though they don't represent a majority of the workers in the party, voters, in the party. Explain those comments.
I think we're mixing apples and oranges. I think very few Republicans do not have any problem with his statements on illegal immigration. In the past, as you know, he had said some very kind of loose things about comprehensive immigration. We didn't really know what he meant. And I think his clarification, frankly, was fine. I think what is more troubling is the recent comments, and they've gotten even more confusing today since his campaign has put out a statement which seems to be approving of his comments, that are really contradictory. And that's what he wants to do on legal immigration. On one hand, he puts out a quote from Scott Brown, who says, Scott Walker really understands immigration. He understands how important it is, and we want economic immigration. We want more H-1B visas. And then he cites a whole bunch of other people who take a very different view. So at this point, I must confess I am confused, and I think he needs to put forth what he thinks and what plan he has, rather than making a little statement here, a little statement there. Everyone kind of interprets, and in that piece that I wrote yesterday, I acknowledge I don't quite know where he is. I'm not sure whether he knows where he is.
Okay, well,
I would like to hear him.
Okay, I think I'd like to hear all of them move away from cliches. Jeb, Marco, and I'd like them to say to us unequivocally, specifically, what they say behind closed doors to their big donors. I think that would be helpful across the board on foreign policy and economic policy. But let's just talk. Let's take one issue at a time, because I think you're right. They tend to conflate, right? But let's focus then on the issue of legal immigration, and these are our census numbers and immigration numbers, the official numbers, they're not my numbers. About 1.7 million legal immigrants come into the country every year through a variety of mechanisms. Some are guest workers, some are spouses of people who are here working legally in the country, and so forth. Some are on business visas, some are green card holders that have come through a variety of channels. But it's about 1.7 million per year. Do you, Jennifer Rubin, think that is too few people?
I think it's the wrong people. I think we need to shift to a economically productive immigration system. As I was beginning to say before, Rubio, who sometimes said is being, sort of an extremist on one end, actually spells out in his book a plan, and what he wants to do is shift from attenuated reunification so that adult children, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and so on get to use up a bunch of those slots, and instead give them to people who are going to either invest, maybe start businesses, are going to be economically productive. And I think rather than numbers, we should begin to talk strategically about what we need to compete in the international global economy. And it's not clear to me from what Scott Walker has said or not said whether that number is going to go up, that number is going to go down. I think we can all agree that we want people who are going to contribute productively to America to enhance other people's wages, as some categories of workers do, rather than be people who are going to be non-productive, who are going to be takers rather than makers.
The problem is that we're going to have both. I mean, that's what we always do. We always have both. But the economic question here is an interesting one. And if indeed we have this dearth of STEM workers, I mean, a dearth. Like, we just need millions and millions of more STEM workers. We just don't have any Americans who could do these jobs or be trained to do these jobs. Then why aren't wages going up? Why aren't we having a real increase in wages? I mean, basic economics would concede that a shortage of workers boosts wages. We have flatlining wages for now about 15 years in the United States. Median incomes, of course, not really going up at all. And it's a devastating middle-class outlook right now. So how is flooding the marketplace with millions of new workers that big business is desperate to have, how is that going to be good for America? It might be good for the businesses. I get that. How is that good for the American people?
I don't know if the numbers are accurate, but I will tell you stem cell jobs, as I have a son heading off for college to be an engineering major, are skyrocketing right now. If you look at median wages for engineers, they are at all-time highs and they're going up, and much higher than the average wage for all Americans. So I think in some categories we clearly do. Now, we also have a different problem, which is we're not training or properly training enough native-born engineers, so we got to fix that problem too. And we don't need a big government program the way Obama has come out with sort of a one-size-all government training program for engineers. But I think we do have areas, and they are reflected in the wage markets if you break them down by profession and job categories. Well,
the most recent, I think, data on this, the total STEM employment, this is the last numbers that we have, is 2012. Was 5.3 million workers, both immigrants and natives. But there are 12.1 million STEM degree holders, immigrant and native, in the United States. So only about a third of native-born Americans with an undergraduate STEM degree are holding jobs today that are typically in a STEM occupation. So we've got a lot of people who have STEM degrees aren't working in STEM jobs. Now, maybe some of them just don't want to work in STEM jobs. That's fine. But that's a huge differential of people who went to the trouble of getting a STEM degree but can't get a job. And what they have is, and I talked to this one kid from Serbia. It's just anecdotal. I mean, this is just a point. Right. But a kid from Serbia was a legal immigrant in the United States, electrical engineer in Vegas last week. And he said, I've had good paying job, 2 different companies, worked in L.A. and in, I guess it was Boston. And he said, these companies keep bringing in foreign workers. He said he had to train one of his foreign worker replacements. He didn't know it was going to be replaced by the guy. He actually had to train him, and now he's driving a car. So all I'm saying is, what kind of country do we want to live in? Do we want to have a country where there's basically no limit on the number of immigrants that business can bring in, because business always wants to have cheaper labor. They always want to have that. That's business. But what kind of country do we ultimately want to have?
Well, we know that isn't true because we have exact figures for H-1B visas. There's a cap on them. So we know exactly how many people are being brought on. It's not millions and millions. We know the exact numbers. So it's not that they're being flooded in, and it's also that we have job data for them. They're not being paid less. In fact, the per-person cost for H-1B visas, and this is logical, is much higher than a domestic worker. I come from an industry in a prior life where there was a lot of H-1B visas and a lot of domestic employees.
So you're saying that the companies want to – you're claiming that the companies spend more to bring foreign workers here, because and that's what they want to do. They want to spend more in labor costs, and that's why they're bringing people here.
That's right, because they don't have the skilled people here, and that's why also domestic wages in computer technology, in oil and gas technology, and so on are rising, because it is a pain to go out and hire a foreign worker. First of all, you have a prevailing wage. Secondly, you have to list and search the wage. Third of all, and I know this because I was in the labor department of a number of companies, you have to then pay relocation costs, housing costs. You are winding on spending on a per-person basis much more for that foreign worker. And the reason they do it is they can't find a domestic worker.
Okay, so then you would concede
a better solution to that than immigration, but it is not. Because they love spending a lot of money to go over to China to find someone who speaks poor English.
Right. So you're saying that they don't have, which that big lawsuit alleging all the collusion on wages by the high tech companies. That it has been
domestic wages as well. I'm very familiar with that.
Right. Right. Well,
I'm personally very familiar.
Right, but it almost gets no coverage in the mainstream media. This ongoing investigation, and I think expose of what these big companies are doing to keep control of wages, agreeing with each other not to raise certain wages and so forth. That's already happening. And all I'm saying is, in the end, it's either working for the American people or it's not. And I would submit that most businesses today, most bigger businesses, at least not the smaller businesses, most of the bigger businesses, when you give them some sodium pentothal, they would say there should be no limit to the number of H-1B visa holders. And the reason they're saying, or in other types of business visas as well, is because once they have them here, they have them here. They're captive to that company. They don't have the nimble ability to move from company to company and then get better wages and say, look, I'm going to get more across the street. I need a wage increase. They can't move with that flexibility. So I would argue, Jennifer, that the reason they want foreign workers here is because they got them locked down once they're here. They can't jump to another company, and that also presents downward pressure on wages. But you can react to that.
Well, I think the lawsuit that you're referring to goes way back, and it only tangentially addresses the issue we're talking about. It's domestic wages, and without revealing the company, I work for one of the companies that was involved in it. So that doesn't really affect the foreign.
It's the credibility of this claim that they want to keep wages going up. You just made this point. They want to bring these people in because they're better They're better apparently than American workers. They know more, and but they're more expensive.
They have to.
What?
They will pay for folks if they can't find domestic ones. The issue of keeping wages low assumes that they have people to fill those slots. The problem is they don't have enough people to fill the slots. So when they need to bring people into the system, they have to go wherever they can go. So that's not a contradiction.
How is Google?
Issue is that
go ahead.
The second issue is that when you talk about the people who are being brought in right now, I don't think you and I have much quibble that some of the people who come in through family relocation are in fact displacing American workers. They are low to middle low workers, and those people are not adding very much to the economic picture. Why don't we convert those to people who are adding to the economic picture? So
would you deport the people who are here illegally?
No, I would change the visa system. I'd change the legal
keep all the 15
system.
million people who are here now illegally and just bring in a whole bunch of high-skilled workers.
We have to deal with those people, but in terms of, we're talking legal immigration now, which is what the Scott Walker thing kind of got into, was shouldn't we at least reform the system that we have? And I, for one, would be more than happy to keep the numbers where they are, but to shift the types of people that are coming in. And that's what some of the proposals, Ted Cruz has a proposal like that, Orrin Hatch has a proposal like that, which is to, as you say, this is something that is beneficial because we want people moving up into higher wage jobs, because we want people doing invention and economically productive things, that we should be doing that.
I get your point on that, and I see some, maybe some common ground that the two of us have on this, but I still think that the number one focus on immigration should be for how it affects Americans, the regular working people of the country, not just the bottom line of certain businesses. I think we have to think of them first, and of course we should have some immigration. Of course, absolutely. But until I see a real credible belief in enforcing the laws that are on the books now at the border, then I just can't. I don't have put much stock in this idea. Well, okay, we're only going to bring in the good people now, the ones who are really working hard, because then grandmother, uncle, brother, They're coming in, they're crossing the border, and then they're saying, wait, people like Jennifer Rubin aren't going to deport me. They're not going to believe I should be deported, so I can stay here and work as a landscaper or, whatever. Do whatever. So they know they're not going to be deported, so we're going to keep people coming across the border. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I think you perhaps misread me. I'm in favor of a border for enforcement, and frankly, I'm come around to the view that you have to have something much, much stronger than we had in the Senate view, that we have to do something that is border enforcement first. You can put me in the Rick Perry camp on that one. So, yes, we have to do that. That's one issue. A second issue is, what do you do after you've gone through all that, after you've gone through E-Verify, if you've gone through all the systems with whatever people are remaining afterwards? Do you, in fact, round those people up and deport them, or do you have some other solution for them? Third issue is, what do you do about the legal immigration system? And I think
focus on the Americans out of work. That's what I would focus on, the tens of millions of American males, African Americans, Latinos, poor whites who can't get jobs. I'd do job training. I'd get all these big tech companies. I'd give them tax breaks to do job training for American workers. I'd give them so you want some tax break for focus on the American people, American workers. If there's super specialized thing, you need someone to speak Farsi and Chinese, bring someone in to do that. But some of these other things, I think a lot of these American kids coming out of these good schools, I think they could do these jobs. Maybe they need a slightly different focus or slightly different training, but I'd give preference to that. Every single day of the week, I'd give preference to that. But Jennifer, there's a lot of issues we hit. We really appreciate you spending some time on this, and it'll be interesting to see where someone like a Scott Walker goes on this and a lot more. But thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate being here.
All right. We'll take a break on your healthy radio addiction.
The Laura Ingraham Show.
Thanks for listening to this podcast excerpt of The Laura Ingraham Show. If you'd like to receive podcasts of our complete shows, go to lauraingraham.com and sign up to become a member of Laura 365. Our Laura 365 members get commercial-free streams and podcasts of our shows every day we're on the air. And also, you can listen to the last 30 days of The Laura Ingraham Show. Be ahead of the curve. Join Laura 365.